Hello everyone, and thanks for coming to the channel. If you've seen my introduction video, you may have a little bit of idea of what I'm about. The video I'm going to make here, and I'll be doing a follow-up video, which is sort of the counterpoint of view, is something I've covered before, but it's useful sometimes to revisit topics that I've looked at before. Simply, I could surprise myself. I might see something from a different angle. Um, what I want to look at here is things about my country, the United Kingdom, that I don't like, that I think we could do without. But without it coming across as overtly negative, I'm going to do a follow-up video about things I do like, even love, about my country. I would say I'm reasonably patriotic. I wouldn't say I'm a hardline nationalist. I'm not always waving the flag, but I do have affection for my country. Things I'm talking about here, whilst they are technically complaints, it doesn't sort of make me want to give up my passport or something. I still think the United Kingdom is a much better place to live than many people give it credit for. And I wouldn't change my nationality, honestly. As much as I'm open minded, as much as I'm well travelled, I still have a deep affection for my country. But things I'm going to talk about, we could definitely do without. Um, this isn't going to be exhaustive. It's going to be things that just come to my head, things that I consider, to stand out as problems. Without further ado, here it goes. And again, I'll be doing a follow up to this video on the positive side, so please stay tuned for that. Okay, honestly, perhaps at the top of the list for me is justice system, and I'm definitely not alone in that regard. If you ask a British person about justice in this country, the chances are um, they'll have a strong opinion on it. It is one of those things that really aggravates the public. Obviously, I can't speak for everyone, but I would say a sizable majority feel that our justice system is out of touch with public sentiment. And what we see with successive governments is some little changes here and there, but it's never really radical. It's never sweeping. It's never so the changes are never so big that it changes public perception, and that's a problem. The way I see our justice system is it's kind of, I do think the justice establishment as a whole is out of touch, but it's a blame game because legislators set the laws, they say they can't interfere in the judiciary. The sentencing councils, there's one in Scotland and one serving England and Wales. I'm not sure what the situation in Northern Ireland is, but they say they're merely issuing out the guidelines. And then judges say that their hands are tied because they're simply following the guidelines. So what we have is a situation where all the powers that be within the justice establishment, from the Ministry of Justice to the judiciary, are are kind of downplaying the influence that they have, and it's deeply, deeply frustrating. I do think that sentencing in too many cases remains far too lenient. Now, this is not universal. If you commit murder in the UK, you will get a long sentence, generally speaking. And we do have some whole life tariffs. We've also had some miscarriages of justice where people have served years in prison for a crime they didn't commit, which is also awful. That can, of course, happen in other countries. Now, I don't say that our justice system is the worst in the world. I don't think it is. We're not living in a totalitarian state where you're thrown in prison for criticizing the government. Um, we are having a problem, which I'll come to later in the video, regarding free speech. I'll get into that. But we don't have that situation, and we don't have like these human battery farms that you'd see in parts of Central America, which I think are pretty shocking. Um, but we also don't have the Nordic system, which is, in my view, overtly lenient. It's like prisons, so called, in those countries are just like holiday retreats. And the whole narrative of the Nordic justice system, I think, is a bit misleading. Actually, Sweden now has a serious crime problem. So the liberal left love to hold up those countries as role models, but actually, their situation is not as rosy as it seems. So looking at it that way, our system is by no means the worst in the world. That doesn't mean it can't greatly improve, because it can. Um, I think the penalties for youth crime in this country are far, far too lenient. I think young offenders are enabled because there's no real deterrent. that deeply depresses and concerns me. That was just a notification I was getting on space. It deeply depresses and concerns me. I think young offenders in Britain are a nightmare. I mean, this is not to vilify young people. Most young people are not that bad, and they themselves are victims of young offenders. But the deterrents in this country are pathetic. I just don't think that they sufficiently fear consequences for their actions, and that has to change. The penalties for dangerous driving are too lenient. We also have a situation where career criminals are absurdly not sent to prison despite offence after offence after offence. So yeah, it's probably top of my list. The situation with crime and justice in this country might not be the worst in the world, but it could radically improve. The public need to feel a lot more empowered with that. Um, Moving on to the next issue, the behaviour of some of our sports fans is embarrassing to say the least, particularly in football, but it isn't just football. You see it sometimes in boxing. I'm talking about idiots who go to other countries and make a fool of themselves. They get extremely jingoistic. They trash the place. They do it in the UK as well. In the 70s and 80s, this was so bad it was called the British disease, the problem of football hooliganism. I'd say it's a bit better today, but it's far from gone. There are still some people that simply cannot behave themselves at a sporting event. Um, Again, this isn't unique to Britain. Um, Countries like Turkey, Egypt, um, do have serious problems with football hooliganism as well, but we have a problem in this country. Um, and it's just sad to see in 2025 that people still have this mentality that they just have no self control, that they can't just enjoy a sporting event without getting blind, drunk, and acting like an ass. It's really quite um, depressing. And a lot of that's steeped in jingoism. Um, I don't want to exaggerate. Most sports fans are decent people, but there's enough idiots out there to cause a problem. Um, One of the most unpleasant things is getting on public transport with a lot of drunk football supporters. Even if they're not being violent, it's just unpleasant. They take over the place. Um, Our public transport system is a lot to be desired. Our railways are overpriced and unreliable. It's pretty ridiculous. It's more expensive to go from Scotland or North East England to London than it is to fly to another country. And even if you do get the train, then it's a situation whereby, you if you get there, that's considered good luck because there's a chance it'll break down. Now, I suppose you have to factor in we have the oldest railway system in the world. We invented railways, but really at a time when ostensibly organizations, the government, etc., are trying to reduce CO2, you'd think they'd be trying to encourage people to use the railways, but they're not doing it. Their prices are hiking. Railway executives are overpaid. It's a serious problem. Um, I think that there is a wealth poverty problem in this country, which leads to it's a problem of social cohesion. And successive governments' approach to welfare has been punitive. It's been focused on sanctions. It's been focused on punishing people. I think that's very misguided. Um, because threatening people with sanctions doesn't get people back into work. That's up to employers to employ people. Successive governments have done this, and it's a complete I'm grateful that we have a welfare state. Many countries don't. But having got that welfare state in recent decades, I could say it's been weaponized. And I think that a large part of the public is misinformed about it. They assume falsely that people just get free money, and that's not the case. Um, Next issue, Brexit. I I don't think Brexit's been a complete disaster. That would be hyperbole, but it clearly hasn't been the massive triumph that its advocates claimed it would be. And it annoys me that whenever a British Prime Minister tries to reset relations with the EU, I may make a video specifically about this, there's this chorus of criticism. He's betraying Brexit. It makes all the sense in the world for this country to have good relations with France, Germany, the Netherlands, Ireland. Why is it that there's this attitude of such hostility. And I don't love the EU as an institution, but it absolutely makes sense that we work with our closest neighbours at a time when there's a belligerent Russia, a belligerent China, and a United States we cannot trust under Donald Trump. I put little rough notes here. I put the culture wars, but perhaps that's overblown. I don't think it's as bad here as it is in the US. Nevertheless, we have some of it. You know, Black Lives Matter and other movements that kind of come onto these shores. I don't think it's as bad as North America. I don't think it's comparable to the extent of, you know, language policing that you would get in Canada or the United States, but it's bad enough. So yeah, the culture wars I would say is a problem. Free speech, you know, we've long said, going back to the French Revolution, if you look at cartoons in this country, we've long seen ourselves as great lovers of liberty. But the truth is, in recent years, particularly with the use of non-crime hate incidents, freedom of speech is under assault in this country. I'm not talking about people promoting violence. I'm talking about people using a few naughty words and getting the police knocking on their doors. It's a disturbing trajectory, and there has to be a pushback against it. I think far too many police forces are abusing their power to focus on that. And the last thing I'll mention is bureaucracy. I think sometimes things are just more complicated in Britain than they need to be. Government bureaucracy. If you look at the Home Office, the sort of visa situation they have, you know, is not straightforward. I've just sat in on a talk by a lawyer to Ukrainians. A lot of them are refugees, but my goodness, that's complex regarding, you know, fixed settlement and so on. I'm not saying it should just be black and white, but I do think bureaucracy in this country can be excessive sometimes. I think sometimes things are made more complicated than they need to be. Now, again, perhaps this is true in countries like Italy and Germany as well. So perhaps Britain's not unique in that regard. Um, all in all, though, I don't think Britain's a particularly happy country at the moment. Um, Clearly, we're in a much better position than some parts of the world, but there's a lot of anger out there about a lot of social issues. I don't think the British are a relaxed people. So, like I said at the start of the video, I have deep affection for this country. Some of those things, you know, I'd like to see a much more a justice system that's much more in touch with public opinion that really gets it. And I don't think they do. I think the public don't feel empowered. There's a lot of things to fault about the United States. I actually think they've arguably a more democratic justice system on the grounds that, you know, you could argue they lock up too many people, and they probably do. But judges in America are far more accountable than judges in Britain. There is something to be said for that. What recourse does the public have in this country? It's deeply frustrating. It's depressing. Um, Now, Britain isn't a particularly dangerous country, actually. If you look at crime rates, if you look at the homicide rate, it's actually quite low compared to some parts of the world. But the chances of being assaulted or, you know, having to put up with antisocial behaviour, I would say, is pretty high in the UK. And that corrodes the quality of life. It creates anxiety, it creates stress. Um, and we have a justice establishment, no matter what they claim, I don't think that they're in touch. I don't think they're doing anywhere near enough to reassure the public, to really listen to the public. There may well be things that can add to this, and the UK could be expensive, but it depends where you live. I'm sure there's other things that can add, but I'm going to offset this now and make another video talking about the positive things. There are also many positive things. Um, so let me know your thoughts. If there's anything you'd like to add to this, you may disagree with some of my points, but feel free to add some of your own. This is not about bashing the UK or running down the UK. It's just about free speech. It's about saying, okay, these are the contentions. Let's talk about them. Um, but no country is perfect, and the things I'm talking about, I'm sure other countries have it even worse. But there you have it. Um, Stay tuned. I'll be making the counter video to this, positive things.